used to hate sanding. Dust everywhere, replacing sandpaper all the time, and sanding curves was a nightmare. These 6 upgrades make sanding so much better. And the last upgrade? Well, let's just say Woodpeckers does not want me to talk about it, but it's so good, I'm going to anyway. I've been trying to find ways not to drink the Kool-Aid and buy a very high-priced sander. Everyone that has one swears that it makes sanding so much more tolerable, and maybe I'll get one day, but not today. Let's make sanding better without needing to take out a second mortgage. If you sand edges like this, you're definitely not alone. I did that for years, our little secret, and it technically works, but it's not comfy on these dainty little hands, and the holes catch and tear regularly. I'll show you a way better sandpaper that has no holes in a little bit. Regular sandpaper is just also tough to get in all the angles. It's not even an option to use your random orbital sander to sand the corners of your workpiece because you'll dent it really fast. I present to you the sanding sponge. This is from 3M, but other companies make them as well. They come in a bunch of different grits, and it's basically like a kitchen sponge, but a lot more rigid. You just need to ask yourself if you're sponge worthy.
So you think you're sponge worthy?
If you need even more rigidity, you can use this sanding block, also from 3M. It's fantastic if you need just a little more stability, and they make their own sandpaper that fits perfectly with this sanding block. The sponge can be used on irregular surfaces and curves, but here's an even better way to sand outside and inside curves. Many people think the drill is just for drilling, but that is ridiculous. They would be wrong. Dead wrong. These little sanding pads that go in the drill work great on the inside of bowls or trays. Really anything that your random orbital sander can't get to and you don't want to hand sand because it'll take 7 years, roughly. I use them on my turned items mostly, but feel free to explore the possibilities. I have the 2-inch and 3-inch sized pads, but you better believe I only bought the 3-inch sized sandpaper and then customized it myself.
Help me, I'm poor.
This is great for larger items that you want to take the sanding to, but what about smaller items that you want to take to the sanding and you may want a little more precision? That's where my next friend comes into play. The cool thing about the rigid belt / oscillating spindle sander is, well, it's both a belt and spindle sander. Long story short, I use the belt for outside edges like this zero clearance insert plate, and the spindle for inside edges like these letters. When you're done with one setting, it's fairly easy to switch it over to the other, but there are some drawbacks to this machine. After using either one for a while, it's almost impossible to unscrew it. Please now pause the video and take this time to make fun of me in the comments for being weak. I have these marks on it because I have to use this grippy tool to unscrew it. It's not really a big deal, but something to note. Also, although I found the belt is pretty gosh dang square, the spindle is not perfectly 90 degrees. But I haven't really used this on a project where it's been imperative that my edges were perfectly 90 degrees. The dust collection is not bad, and after 2 years of using this, I'm satisfied. I found that with sanding certain things, this is the best tool for the job, and it's phenomenal for sanding inside curves in my opinion, and that is the only opinion I have. I was actually a little worried about where I was going to put it because my shop is pretty small, but then I decided to build this 2-for-1 tool cart, which really helped. Alright, let's be honest. I really only built it so I could flip it repeatedly. But I don't need this tool a ton, which is definitely not the case with my random orbital sander. Before we get to a pretty big upgrade for the random orbital sander, I want to briefly mention that I started a Patreon. Now, Patreon is a way to support creators, and in exchange, you get a bunch of perks. On my Patreon, you'll get a hefty discount on plans, a lot of behind-the-scenes content, as well as my YouTube videos early and ad-free. There are other perks like chats and exclusive updates, and it's just a really cool community. But even if you don't sign up, I truly appreciate you just watching this YouTube video right now. So I want to give you a very sincere thank you. And of course, you know it's sincere when the person tells you it's sincere. I use this tool all the time, and when I got it, I thought the bag would be good enough. But I was wrong. Dead wrong. You need suction. I kept hearing and seeing online that if you want good dust collection on your sander, you need to buy a dust extractor. But since I don't want to sell my spleen on the black market, I thought I'd find a cheaper option. And spoiler alert, I did! But before I found this really good solution, I thought it'd be fun to torture myself and connect a dust port to my shop vac hose. but the dust port didn't secure very strongly and kept detaching when I would use it. A really fun feature. So after I cried for a very short amount of time, I went out and bought the Rockler FlexiPort Dust Hose Kit. This gem comes with a sanding attachment and its own hose that attaches directly to the shop vac. The hose is really flexible and the port secures really tightly, so I've never had an issue with it detaching. Yeah, this is all well and good, but if you don't have the right sandpaper, you're gonna be sanding for way longer than you need to be. A much overlooked item, but the most important part about sanding is, you guessed it, the sandpaper. You're smart. But for years I used the cheap Amazon special sandpaper and I wondered, why the heck is this sandpaper not lasting very long? Yeah, it's cheap, but when you factor in how many pieces of paper you're going to need compared to the more expensive paper, it actually could be more expensive. Jonathan Katz-Moses did a great video on that, which I'll link in the description. This is the 710W sandpaper from 3M, also called Extract, which is an underrated movie, by the way. Which reminds me that Bad Words, also starring Jason Bateman, was another underrated movie, but do not watch it with kids in the room. This sandpaper not only lasts a lot longer than the cheap stuff, but it has way better ventilation, so the dust collection is much better. Is it as durable as some other sandpaper? No, but it's not really an issue because we're not going to use it to hand sand anymore, are we? That was a little aggressive, but I'm not going to apologize for it. I do it out of love. Oh, here's a little tip. Always use a sanding pad with your random orbital because it'll make the built-in pad last longer. So in summary, this sandpaper is a little more expensive initially, but it's a lot more cost effective because it'll last longer. The same cannot be said for a certain sock company, which is super duper expensive, and I get holes in my socks after only a few months. Yeah, we're talking socks. But I digress. Actually, since we're throwing companies under the bus, I might as well add another one to the list. Chris from A Glimpse Inside came up with this upside down random orbital sander mount, which is phenomenal for sanding a lot of small pieces. This could be a great replacement for the rigid belt / spindle sander I talked about earlier for some projects, and the best part, this is only $79 and the rigid sander is $299. Now the juicy part. He came up with this product himself and started selling it on his website in March of 2022. Then just over a year later, Woodpeckers came out with a very similar product and started selling it. What a big coincidence.
There are no small coincidences and big coincidences.
He made a whole video about it on his YouTube channel. Unfortunately, this is not an isolated incident, and the same thing has happened with multiple woodworkers that I know, which is a shame. But here's the best part. Let's end on a positive note. What makes this woodworking and making community so great is when Chris came out with the YouTube video talking about all this shadiness, the community really showed up for him, and he sold over $34,000 in total products in a single month. So cool. This is a really cool product which works great, and I enjoy using it even more because now I finally have proper dust collection for my sander. Over the past year, I've really been focusing on improving dust collection in my small garage shop, and this video right here will explain to you how to improve your dust collection. I'll see you over there, and remember, be kind, be awesome.